I live in India, as you just heard, and a couple of days ago, arrived at Heathrow. You all know the feeling. Early morning, long lines, and patiently waited my turn. Put my passport on the immigration officer's ledge, and they always ask you something about why you're coming to the UK. And this gentleman asked me, "What do you do?" And so I said, work with children and young people. He then said, very unlikely question for an immigration officer, "So what is India's biggest development challenge?" 6:30 a.m. Heathrow, long flight. So I said, for lack of anything else, I said, preparing young people for the future. He then wanted to have a long chat about how the UK's problems and India's problems may be similar or different. But we had like 400 people waiting in line. And so I said, maybe we can talk about this some other time. And he looked a bit sad as I walked away. And this morning I was thinking, maybe we should have invited him to come and join us here, where you're spending the whole morning talking about this. How do I connect young people from India with you guys? Exactly the same age, probably going through a lot of similar pathways in life. And so I thought maybe the best way to do is to introduce you to 4 people. No augmented reality, no virtual reality, just an old-fashioned little film. So maybe you can have the film, and then we'll have some more.
मेरा नाम मुस्कान है और मैं 17 साल की हूँ और मेरा घर प्रेची में शिमला में है।
मेरा नाम विक्रम हंसदा और मेरा उम्र 16 चल रहा है अब।
मेरा नाम सोनू है और मेरी एज 17 ईयर ओल्ड।
నా పేరు సారి గణపతి నాకు 17 సంవత్సరాలు నేను ప్రతిభ జూనియర్ కళాశాలలో చదువుతున్నాను
15 साल की थी तब मैंने स्कूल छोड़ा था। मम्मी के कमाने वाला कोई नहीं था तो हम कमाने लगे तो इसलिए पढ़ाई अच्छी लगती थी इसलिए पढ़ाई करती थी। टीचर मन होता था कभी कभी टीचर को पढ़ाते हुए देखते थे इसलिए मुझे भी मन होता था कभी मैं भी टीचर बनूँ बैठे बैठे आराम कर बच्चों को पढ़ाऊँ।
4टा बेले सर फुटबॉल खेलवाई जाऊँगी सर डिफेन्स लाइन चाकरी मोर आशा करी चाकरी करी से सर सबुदिन सकाଳେ दौड़ा दौड़ी करुँच एवं देशर सुरक्षा आशा करुँच।
ఈ రోజుల్లో ఏంటంటే చెట్లు కట్ట నరికడం వల్ల నీటి శాతం తగ్గుతుంది నెక్స్ట్ ఏంటంటే అనుకున్నటువంటి విపత్తులు మనకి ఎదురవుతున్నాయి కాబట్టి ఆ విపత్తుల నుండి జనాలను రక్షించాలనే ఉద్దేశం మీద నేను ఇండియన్ నేవీ ఆఫీసర్ అవ్వాలనుకుంటున్నాను।
तो मैं ये चाहती हूँ कि मेरी जॉब लगेगी ना फौज में तो मेरे को एक घर ले 2 रूम ही होना वो भी बहुत है पर 2 रूम लेने नहीं है इसलिए पढ़ाई करो अच्छी से जॉब लगे बस वही है और तब घर भी लेना है अपने मम्मी पापा के लिए कुछ करना है। मेरे को पुलिस में जाना है एम है मेरा पुलिस में ना 6 से लेके एम था उसमें चलो ये ना अगर वहाँ से लोग डरते भी है उसमें चलो कुछ किसी में भी लग जाए तो पुलिस में तो जाना ही पर मैं लग नहीं सकती स्कूल में कोई भी गाइड करने के लिए नहीं है। घर वालों का सपोर्ट तो पूरा है पर किसी को इतनी समझ नहीं है कि कैसे करना है। एग्ज़ाम का मेरे को नाम नहीं बताया कि क्या नाम होता है पर ये बोला कि हाँ टफ होता है अगर वो एग्ज़ाम का नाम बताते तो क्लियर हो जाता कि इस एग्ज़ाम का नाम ये होता है।
टीचर बनने के लिए अच्छा पढ़ना होगा अच्छा पढ़ना जो नहीं है उसका दिमाग में और अच्छी तरह बिठाना उनको ट्यूशन पे जाना और ऐसे मुझे नहीं पता ऐसे टीचर बनाने का कॉलेज भी होता है। टीचर बनूँ या नहीं बनूँ तो लाइफ ऐसे ही चलेगी वैसा चेंज तो नहीं होगी।
डिफेन्स लाइन चाकरी तो मुझे भल कि जाने कौन कौन अच्छी कौन करा जहाँ देखी शुणी नहीं बंदूक धरती हमारा डिफेंस का चाकरी से पढ़ने के लिए कॉलेज तो मालूम नहीं आम कॉलेज सेमती तो किसी कहती ना डिफेन्स लाइन चाकरी विषय मैंने सेमती आसती ना कि लेक्चर मैडम भी कही ना बड़ बापा आओ मो कका जदि बुझेबे मैंने एतकी मार्क दरकार +2 सेकेंड ईयर और आमर तो पढ़ाई सुविधा नहीं ଆଉ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରିବି ନିଜେ ନିଜର।
నాకు ఒక నావీ ఆఫీసర్ ఎలాగవ్వాలో ప్రిపేర్ అవ్వాలనేది తెలియదు. నాకు తెలిసినంతలో నేను ఒక నావీ ఆఫీసర్ ఎలాగవ్వాలో అనేది నేను ప్రిపేర్ అవుతున్నాను. నాకు నావీ ఆఫీసర్ అవ్వాలని అనుకున్న తప్పించి వాటి మీద ఏవి చదివితే అవుతాయి అనేసి తెలియదు. ఎక్కువ మంది మ్యాథ్స్ గట్ట చెప్పారు కానీ మరి ఏవి చదివితే అవుతామనేది నాకు కూడా తెలియదు. మా నాన్నగారు అయితే చదువు వార్తాపత్రికలు చదువు అని చెప్తారు తప్పించి ఆయనకి ఎలా ప్రిపేర్ చేయాలో తెలియదు. ఎందుకంటే అతను ఓల్డ్ మ్యాన్, అతను 5వ తరగతి వరకు చదువుకున్నారు. అంతే మా అమ్మగారు చదువుకోలేదు.
भविष्य के बारे में तो कुछ नहीं सोचा। 10 साल बाद में जिंदा रहूंगी तो कहीं बेटी होंगी और क्या पता।
ଆଶା କରିଛି ଆଉ କେମିତି କଷ୍ଟ ନଷ୍ଟ ପାଇବି ଭଗବାନଙ୍କ ଇଏରେ ବାଇ ଚାନ୍ସ ଯଦି ପାଇବି। ଆଶା ତ ବହୁତ ଅଛି ଡିଫେନ୍ସ ଲାଇନ୍ ଚାକିରି କରିବା ପାଇଁ।
నేను ఒకవేళ నావీ ఆఫీసర్ కానీ లేకుంటే ఏదో గవర్నమెంట్ జాబ్ కానీ పొందపోయినట్లయితే నేను కష్టపడే తత్వం నాలో ఉంది కాబట్టి నేను ఎక్కడ తగ్గకుండా ఎటువంటి సమస్యకి వెనుకాడకుండా దాన్ని పోరాడిచి ఓడిపోయినా సరే నేను ఏదో ఒకటి సాధిస్తాననే నమ్మకం నాలో ఉంది కాబట్టి నేను మా తల్లిదండ్రులు బాగా చూసుకుంటాను.
अगर मैं पुलिस बनूंगी ना तो सब पे इफेक्ट पड़ेगा। सबकी बेटियाँ सोचे कि हम भी ये करें, हम भी जॉब करें, कुछ ना कुछ करें। उम्मीद नहीं छोड़नी है, उम्मीद में तो दुनिया कायम है। तो मेरी उम्मीद नहीं टूटेगी।
So this particular age group, exactly the age group that you're in, 14 to 18, is I think a really important age for all countries, but particularly so in big countries of the developing world, where really what is going to be possible in the future is going to be decided based on what these kids get ready for. In India, if you think about people in each age group, in each single year age group, there are about 25 million people. And so, if I take the age group 14 to 18, there is more young people in this age group than perhaps in the population of many countries. Depending on how you count, that's about 100 million or 125 million people that we are talking about. It's also an important phase in their life because we have compulsory education till 8th grade, so say till 14. And then you can't officially start working in like an organized sector job till you're 18. So you have these 4 years in which really to sow the seeds of what you'll be able to do later. Now, if you look back, even 10 years or 15 years, it was not that common for everybody to be enrolled and going to school. And if you have to think of one of the biggest achievements that as human civilization we've achieved in the last 25 years in a large part of the developing world, it would be to establish the absolute importance of going to school. And so even in a country like India, 96% of kids of elementary school age are enrolled in school. But more interestingly, if I look only 10 years, the number of kids who were enrolled in 8th grade in, let's say, 2007 or 8 was about 11 million. And today that number is close to 25 million. So in the last 10 years, there's been a massive explosion, not just of going to school, but staying in school till 8th grade. Now, if I went around this room and asked you, you obviously have finished 8th grade, all your parents, I'm sure, had finished 8th grade, and I'm sure a very large proportion of your grandparents had also completed 8th grade. But for many of the kids that you saw here, they are the first in their families and often the first generation in their communities, in their villages, to have come up to there. So on the one hand, the aspiration for what education or what schooling can do is rising exponentially because all the adults around you have not had that opportunity. And so you have your own ambition, but I think on your shoulders, these children are carrying the aspirations of their entire families and their entire communities as well. So let's think a little bit about if I had to summarize everything that those kids said, I would probably put them in some bucket like this. What do you do today? What are you able to do? What do you want to do tomorrow? And what do you know about how to get to what you want to do tomorrow? And this age group only because this is that middle between when you leave school or when you can leave school and before you can get to work. In India, we do, as part of my organization, a very interesting big exercise called the Annual Status of Education Report. The acronym says ASER, ASER, which in many Indian languages means impact. And it's a very interesting thing. We go, every district in India, we have about 600 districts, rural districts, and there is a sample of households that are picked from every district, and there is usually a bunch of young people, often your age, from schools and colleges, who are trained to go out into this randomly selected set of villages and households and ask them some questions. We've been doing this for almost 15 years now, and fundamentally it was meant to track our kids in school and are they able to do some of the very basic things that you're expected to learn in school, such as read and do basic math. So even before talking about the aspirations and the awareness, what I did was to pull out for the last round of what we did at 8th grade. They're all in school. Let's look at where are they with their foundational learning. And the reason I'm doing this is, of course, India is important, and that's the only thing I know about. But I think these are not very different from trends and patterns in large parts of sub-Saharan Africa and some parts of other parts of the world as well. So, in terms of reading, simple story. Don't worry if you can't read it. Lots of parents of children in school in India can't read it either. But it's just a short story, usually at like a 2nd grade level. A simple story. And when we look at kids in 8th grade, a lot of kids can read it, but there is still about a 25% who reached all the way up to 8th grade, but haven't yet learned how to read. And so what possibilities are possible for them beyond, you can guess. If I look at math, and these are just a lot of Indian states, a simple basic math operation, a 3-digit by a 1-digit division problem, again like a 3rd grade or a 4th grade a kind of operation, and you see a very big range with the all India number, which is in green, under 50%. So 8 years of school, but perhaps only maybe 3 or 4 years of learning. And the aspirations of your entire community and family who think that just by being in school, you now are going to have a future that's completely different from what everybody else has had around you. Now, how does all of this translate to just everyday type of stuff? And we did a bit of that, and these are huge samples. Every year we meet about 600,000 or 700,000 children. And so these very, very simple facts are coming out of a big pool of kids who've actually done this. It's not a pen and paper test. Somebody actually asks you to read and you read out loud. You ask problems, and so it's a one-on-one exercise. And I want to show you very quickly some kind of everyday tasks. One task says you went to bed at 10:30 and you woke up at 5:30 in the morning. How many hours was that? The other one says to clean 15 liters of water, you need these 3 water purifying tablets. How many tablets would you need for 40 liters? Books, you have to buy school books. There are 2 offers on hand. Which one will you choose that makes sense? And probably the last one, which most people would like to be able to do well, is you're going to go buy some clothes, and there's a discount, and how much? So everyday applications of, you can say basic computations, and these questions were only asked to the kids who could actually do their basic, multiplication, division kinds of problems. And here you can see how the kids did. And disturbingly, you can see that girls are doing a lot worse at this age than the boys. There may be many reasons for that, but fundamental foundational skills being weak leads you to not being able to do a lot of your everyday calculations, which are important not just for you, but because you're probably the only one in your family who can help your family when you go to get a bank loan or fill out some kind of forms and so on. So what we see all around us is, I think, we've talked this morning about a lot of things in the future, about how the world is changing. I think that what I bring is that many things that we've come to expect as completely guaranteed and normal are still not happening in many parts of the world. Fundamental mismatch. Out of these kids who are in the at least age group of 15 and 16, beyond compulsory school, most remain enrolled in some kind of an educational institution because you think that education is what is going to take you out of where you are today. But interestingly, almost 45% of them work. And they work usually with their parents, either on the farm or if parents have a kind of a family shop or whatever. And when you talk to these kids, they're working today, they're studying for tomorrow, but given what their foundation skills are, that tomorrow is not going to go very far in the education system, and almost routinely, none of them want as adults to do the work that their parents are doing. So if you think of the work that the parents are doing as sort of 19th or 20th century kinds of work, and not even jobs, because most are employed on their own family's farm or shop, they are not happy with what their parents did, but unable perhaps to reach where you think the world is headed. Another fundamental mismatch, and you saw from what the kids said, many want to go into being the kinds of things that you see around you in the community. Somebody wanted to be a teacher, police, army. I bet if I checked here, there'd be very few people who actually wanted to become at least a police officer or go into the army, apart from our speaker earlier today, who probably has to do it. And that's because you see such people around you in the village. And routinely we find that kids will say, I want to become something, but they really don't have an idea of the path to get there. We interviewed a lot of grown-ups, a lot of parents, grandparents, school principals, village headmen, and everybody would say, we want our kids to be three kinds of things. We want them to be good human beings, we want them to be good citizens, and we want them to have a good job. But when you ask people, how do you become a good human being? You just become a good human being. There's no training for being a good human being. You're just supposed to become a good human being. How do you be a good citizen? Apart from casting your vote, nobody had very clear ideas on how do you become a good citizen. And finally, a good job, the only way you're going to get it is to go through the education system, reach up to college, go through some very competitive kinds of processes, and that's going to get you a good job. So even the adults around our kids really didn't have a way of explaining or guiding the children around them. Now, as a system, as a large system, as a society, if I look, and I think again, India is not unique. I think there are similar beliefs in other parts of the world. Because education came, because schooling came perhaps quite late into the large majority of the population, individual performance is highly valued. My child is doing very well in this exam on this subject. Book learning is highly valued because many people perhaps didn't have it. But as you look around, and I've been watching the group that has organized this event, a lot of what we need to do as we leave school and get into the world outside is how do you work effectively as groups? How do you figure out who will do what? Often our groups are quite heterogeneous. Not everybody can do everything equally well. And knowing as a group how to bring out the best in each other, that's perhaps one of the best skills that we're going to need when we leave. How do you take everything you know and be able to apply it to solve some problems in the world around? And again, I think several of our speakers have made exactly that effort. This is what I know and this is what I'm going to take to be able to connect to other people outside in the world at large. So as we look around, I think that we have in many parts of the world a huge faith and a huge trust in something that we call the school system, and into which children, youth, and families are pouring all their hope. And yet we can see, with the world that is changing really fast outside, and with the difficulties that the school system inside has had to prepare everyone, not just a few to succeed, but to prepare everyone to succeed, this is now a time where we need to bring everything that's outside the school to be able to help what's inside. And so, in very broad chunks, the way that we as a big organization in India are thinking about how do you begin to solve these problems is first by saying, yes, you need to be prepared to learn to go to school more, but that's probably going to happen only to a very small top of the class that's going to move and go to college. The second one, I think, is how do you get ready for work? And ready for work is not ready for a job. Ready for work, I think, has all these other attributes of how do you work with people, how do you apply yourself, how do you come up with resources which are not immediately visible to you. And then I think finally, and particularly this week, it's probably most salient, but how do you get ready and how do you learn for life? And the learn for life is how to help people immediately around you. But as we can see with a lot of brave young people who are your age, who are sailing across the seas, but how do you really learn not just for yourself and for the immediate world around you, but for a much bigger world. Now, there could be many things that I could share with you about some of these experiments, but that would be another whole TED Talk. And I know you have many other people lined up. What I want to say is that one of your friends, Arhan, who introduced me, spent the couple of weeks in the summer looking at some of these new experiments. And so perhaps one day you'll give him a chance to come and talk here, and he can tell you what lies ahead. Thank you so much.